Good morning, Israel. Awaken, my brothers and sisters in Israel. We're going back to the typical, usual format. We're going to read from the scriptures today. We're going to go into a book that, if you go to the big box churches, they'll give you all kinds of things to pull from in this particular book. And there's a few things I'll point out to you along the way. I'll try not to stop myself and interrupt myself too much. But this is a nice, quaint book, and there's some dynamism in it, and there's some things in here that are kind of hidden from you. And I do think that this is an important book. Why? Because this sets up the lineage through which Yahshua, the Messiah, came from. It was very important in that. And it also is a bit of a turn from racial purity, ethnic purity. I don't know how to say it. And there's some unsavory things in this as well that you probably aren't going to want to hear. But I think that we need to turn to the scripture, let the scriptures speak for themselves. Here goes the overhead light. Sorry about that. It's not very good, but I have to have it to read. The book of Ruth. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land. And a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to dwell in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. Ephrathites. From Ephraim? Okay. And they came into the country of Moab and continued there. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Oprah, and the name of the other was Ruth, and they dwelt there about 10 years. Now let's pause right here and get a little bit more background. Ruth the Moabitess. Boy, I have trouble pronouncing that word. The Moabites were descendants of Lot. When Sodom and Gomorrah were nuked, they were destroyed. It was hellfire and brimstone. Lot was pulled out by the 2 angels with his family, and they told Lot and his family, don't look back. Just keep going, run this direction, don't look back. Lot's wife, unfortunately, looked back. She couldn't resist. She turned, looked, and died on the spot, turned into a pillar of salt, of stone. That was it. She was over. And so Lot went with his 2 daughters into the mountains. Now you've got to consider the circumstances, so I am going to give some excuses for these 2 young girls. They just saw their entire world blown up, destroyed. They witnessed a nuclear explosion. Not only that, but they probably saw other nuclear explosions in Gomorrah and the other villages around, because they were all destroyed using hellfire and brimstone. Angels of the Lord showed up, and they rendered God's judgment, Yahweh's judgment upon those inhabitants. And Lot, as we read earlier, he actually argued with God, pleading for the city, or with an angel of the Lord. But we'll get to that book and read that again. And again, go to the Bible, what it says, not what I say. I'm still overcoming the brainwashing from my childhood at Sunday school, where they didn't tell me the truth, the full truth in the Bible. They colored it up a bit and changed it. So he had 2 daughters. And the daughters believed that they were never going to be mothers, they were never going to have husbands, that there were no men left in the world. They thought it was just them and their father. And so they talked to one another, and they discussed it, and they felt like the earth was over. We three are it. And they knew that they should not do what they were going to do, but they thought, this is the last man. And they felt compelled to carry on the race, to carry on the peoples, to procreate, to follow the prime directive, which is be fruitful and multiply. So they conspired, and they got their father drunk, and they slept with him. They had sex with him. They both got impregnated by their father. And so 2 different groups of peoples came from that, whatever you want to call it. So the second night, the younger daughter, I think, went in with the father. And so they took turns on that. And one of them produced the Ammonites, and the other one produced the Moabites. They were at odds with Israel. And so this group of people here were actually Israelites. Okay, they were not hybrids. They didn't have fallen angelic DNA in them. So they weren't of that seed which God tells those people 5 times don't intermarry. So they weren't violating that directive, but they were thinking, and they came up at the fact that their father was a just man, so just that he was rescued out of Sodom. He was a judge in Sodom, so noble that Yahweh sent his angels and pulled him and his family out. Lot had earlier argued on behalf of Sodom, if for the sake of 100 honest, righteous men will you spare the city? 50, 10. There weren't that many righteous men in all of Sodom. If you want to understand Sodom better, you go to the book of Jasher. It will explain the character and their practices. It wasn't just sodomy. It was much more wicked, in my opinion, than that. They were noted for that practice, certainly. That's how we get the word sodomy, sodomizer. That was their crowning characteristic by which they became infamous. And look at the judgment that was leveled against them. And they took them wives of the women of Moab, the 2 sons of Naomi. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelt there about 10 years. And Mahlon and Chilion died also, both of them. And the woman was left with her 2 sons, left of her 2 sons and her husband. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law, that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab how that Yahweh had visited his people in giving them bread. The famine was over. Therefore she went forth out of the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, since they were Moabites, go, return each to your mother's house, to her mother's house. Yahweh deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. So she blessed her daughters-in-law. Yahweh grant that you may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband, wishing they would find new husbands. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voice and wept. And they said to her, surely we will return with you to your people. And Naomi said, turn again, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Are there yet any more sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Remember, the tradition was that if your your husband passed away, you married his brother to carry on his name. And your first child was in the name of your deceased husband. Subsequent children were in the name of your new husband. And so the line was carried on. And that was the law. That was required. That was the duty of the brother to his deceased brother, to his family. And we'll get into that some more in other passages. Turn again, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband, if I should say I have hope, if I should have a husband also tonight, and should also bear sons. Would you wait for them till they were grown? Would you stay for them from having husbands? No, my daughters, for it grieves me much for your sakes that the hand of Yahweh has gone out against me. And they lifted up their voice and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, Behold, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return you after your sister-in-law. And Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave you, or to return from following after you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, will I die, and there will I be buried. Yahweh do so to me, and more so, if anything but death part you and me. When she saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, then she left speaking of her. So the two went until they came to Bethlehem, and it came to pass, when they had come to Bethlehem, that all the city was moved about them. And they said, Is this Naomi? And she said to them, Call me not Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and Yahweh has brought me home again empty. Why then call you me Naomi, seeing Yahweh has testified against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me? So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, which returned out of her country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of barley harvest. Ruth chapter 2. And Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth, and of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, Let me now go to the field, and glean ears of corn after him in whose sight I shall find grace. And she said to her, Go, my daughter. Now let's stop for just a second. Boaz was so important that one of the two pillars in the front of the temple was named after him, Boaz. I believe the other one was Jabin, Jacobin. But Boaz always comes out because of this story. That name just sticks with me rather well. Two pillars of the temple. And by the way, your trade towers were two pillars as well. They were very symbolic when they brought that down. And she said to her, Go, my daughter. And she went and came and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come upon a part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was the kindred of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and said to the reapers, Yahweh be with you. And they answered him, Yahweh bless you. Then said Boaz to a servant that was set over the reapers, Whose damsel is this? Now, let's stop again. The law was you didn't harvest everything. You gleaned, but you didn't take from the edge of the fields. You left something behind. The reason you left it behind was so that the people that were widows, that were homeless, could go and glean those pickings for themselves so they would have something to eat. That was the practice back then in that theocracy. And so Boaz is saying, Bless you. He understands his obligation. He understands their needs. He understands what they're there for. He's a very good man. Then Boaz said to his servant that was set over the reapers, so he even put a servant over them to watch over them, take care of them, "Whose damsel is this?" And the servant that was set over the reapers answered and said, "It is the Moabitish damsel that came back with Naomi out of the country of Moab." And she said, "I pray you, let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves." So she came and has continued, even from the morning until now, that she tarried a little in the house. Then said Boaz to Ruth, "Hear you not, my daughter? Go not to glean in any other field, neither go from here, but stay close by my maidens. Let your eyes be on the field that they do reap, and go after them. Have I not charged the young men that they should not touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink of that which the young men have drawn." Then she fell on her face and bowed herself to the ground and said to him, "Why have I found grace in your eyes, that you should take knowledge of me, seeing I am a stranger?" And Boaz answered and said to her, "It has been fully shown to me all that you have done to your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, and how you have left your father and your mother and the land of your birth, and have come to a people which you knew not before. Yahweh repay your work, and a full reward be given to you from Yahweh, God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to trust." Then she said, "Let me find favor in your sight, my lord, for that you have comforted me, and for that you have spoken friendly to your handmaid, though I am not like unto one of your handmaidens." And Boaz said to her, "At mealtime come you here and eat of the bread, and dip your morsel in the vinegar." And she sat beside the reapers, and he reached her parched corn, and she did eat, and was satisfied, and left. And when she had risen up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and reproach her not. And let fall also some of the handfuls on purpose for her, and leave them that she may glean them, and rebuke her not." So she gleaned in the field until evening, and beat out that which she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. And she took it up, and went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw that what she had gleaned, and she brought forth and gave it to her that which she had reserved after she was satisfied. And her mother-in-law said to her, "Where have you gleaned today? And where worked you? Blessed be he that did take knowledge of you," and showed her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, "The man's name with whom I work today is Boaz." And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed be he of Yahweh, who has not left off his kindness to the living and to the dead." And Naomi said to her, "The man is near of kin to us, one of our next kinsmen." And Ruth the Moabitess said, He said to me also, "You shall keep close by my young men until they have ended all my harvest." And Naomi said to Ruth her daughter-in-law, "It is good, my daughter, that you go out with his maidens, that they meet you not in any other field." So she kept close by the maidens of Boaz to glean to the end of the barley harvest and of the wheat harvest, and dwelt with her mother-in-law. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, shall I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? And now is not Boaz of our kindred, with whose maidens you were? Behold, he winnows barley tonight in the threshing floor. Wash yourself, therefore, and anoint you, and put your clothing upon you, and get you down to the floor. But make not yourself known to the man, until he shall have finished eating and drinking. And it shall be when he lies down, that you shall mark the place where he shall lie. And you shall go in and uncover his feet and lay down, and he will tell you what you shall do. And she said to her, all that you say to me, I will do. And she went down to the floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law told her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of corn. And she came softly and uncovered his feet and laid herself down. And it came to pass at night that the man was afraid, and turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And he said, who are you? And she answered, I am Ruth, your handmaid. Spread therefore your skirt over your handmaid, for you are a near kinsman. And he said, blessed be you of Yahweh, my daughter, for you have shown more kindness in the latter than at the beginning, inasmuch as you followed not young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, fear not. I will do to you all that you require, for all the people of my people does know that you are a virtuous woman. And now it is true that I am your near kinsman. However, there is a kinsman nearer than I. Tarry this night, and it shall be in the morning, that if he will perform to you the part of a kinsman, well, let him do the kinsman's part. But if he will not do the part of the kinsman to you, then I will do the part of the kinsman to you. As Yahweh lives, lie down until the morning. And she lay at his feet until the morning, and she rose up before one could recognize another. And he said, let it not be known that a woman came to the floor. And he said, bring the veil that you have upon you, and hold it. And when she held it, he measured 6 measures of barley, and laid it on her, and she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, who are you, my daughter? Who are you, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done to her. And she said, these 6 measures of barley gave he to me. For he said to me, go not empty unto your mother-in-law. And then said she, sit still, my daughter, until you know how the matter will fall. For the man will not be in rest until he has finished this matter this day. Then went Boaz up to the gate, and sat him down there. And behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz spoke came by, to whom he said, ho, such a one, turn aside, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city, and said, sit you down here. And they sat down. And he said to the kinsman, Naomi, that has come again out of the country of Moab, sells a parcel of land which was our brother Elimelech's. And I thought to reveal to you, saying, buy it before the inhabitants and before the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not redeem it, then tell me, that I may know, for there is none to redeem it besides you, and I am after you. And he said, I will redeem it. Then said Boaz, the day you buy the field in the hand of Naomi, you must buy it also from Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. You're obligated. And the kinsman said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I mar my own inheritance. Redeem you my right to yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Now this was the manner in former time in Israel concerning redeeming and concerning changing. For to confirm all things, a man plucked off his shoe and gave it to his neighbor. And this was a testimony in Israel. Therefore the kinsman said to Boaz, buy it for yourself. So he drew off his shoe. And Boaz said to the elders and to all the people, you are witnesses this day. I have bought all that was Elimelech's, and all that was Chilions, and Mahlons from the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of his place. You are witnesses this day. And all the people that were in the gate and the elders said, We are witnesses. Yahweh, make the woman that has come into your house like Rachel and Leah, which too did build the house of Israel. And do you worthily in Ephrathah, and be famous in Bethlehem. And let your house be like the house of Pharez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, of the seed which Yahweh shall give you from this young woman. Pharez is the house that Yahshua comes from. So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife. And when he went unto her, Yahweh gave her conception, and she bore a son. And the women said to Naomi, Blessed be Yahweh, which has not left you this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel. Yeah, Yahweh. And he shall be to you a restorer of your life, and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, which loves you, which is better to you than 7 sons, has borne him. And Naomi took the child, and laid it to her bosom, and became a nurse to it. And the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, There is a son born to Naomi. And they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Pharez. Pharez begot Hezron, and Hezron begot Ram, and Ram begot Amminadab, and Amminadab begot Nahshon, and Nahshon begot Salmon, and Salmon begot Boaz, and Boaz begot Obed, and Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David. It's a beautiful short book. It's loaded with imagery and with sayings which we can interpret in different ways. So we know that Boaz was a righteous man, and we know that Ruth was a righteous woman. We know that Ruth was a descendant of Lot. She was a Moabitess. I have trouble with that name. We also know that she took her mother's advice totally. That she left with her and became a full-blown Israelite. And we know that from her came forth Yahshua, who points our way to salvation, to Yahweh. There's some interesting things in here, and in a certain sense it smacks of a setup, and it smacks of some manipulation, if you will. It was all purposeful. It was all in the culture. These were all in the cultural norms, so let's not say anything rude or crude about it. I have had some people tell me that uncovering the feet meant something. I think actually it might have been covering the feet as when dropping one's robe, because we have in the book of Judges, one of these bad guys went in and covered his feet or uncovered his feet, meaning he was relieving himself in the toilet. So she may have exposed him. We don't know what. We don't know what exactly happened. We do know that he was shocked, and he took action to protect her, and he decided that he wanted her for a wife, and he realized that it wasn't his choice, that there was another relative closer to her who had first choice on her. And then part of this redeeming of her was, you're going to buy the land, and you're going to preserve your brother's name. And the other relative couldn't do that without risking his inheritance going to some others. He didn't want to do that. Who knows how many children he already had? Who knows what was already in the works for him? But we do know that he was fully consulted, and he told Boaz, do it. Go ahead. I yield to you. I can't do it, so it's up to you. And Boaz lived up to his obligation. They both did. It's a beautiful story. And what you need to realize is that the line, we could say, was broken. And the blessings in here are tremendous. Become like Tamar, who gave birth to Pharez and Zerah, the two boys, the twins. And Zerah left and went up and founded, one of his boys founded Troy, another one ended up on the northern coast of Ireland. And his descendant married Tia Tamar, the crown princess, and at that point he became king. The low branch was lifted high, the Zerah part of that, and the high branch, the Pharez line, was brought low. They exchanged places. The great prophet, the great eagle, had plucked the tendermost twig from the top of the cedar. It was a feminine twig. He had taken the crown princess all the way from Israel up to Ireland. And Pharez meant breach because he breached. He came out first. Zerah popped his hand out first. The midwife tied a scarlet thread around the boy's hand, the boy's wrist, to mark him. He pulls his hand back in. And the midwife speaks very prophetically about his, about what was going on, and the other one coming out. And there was argument about which one was first. The one who put his hand out. And that's why the symbol for the Irish, one of their symbols, is the hand with a scarlet thread around it. It's a red hand typically. I don't really want to say much more. Boaz became so famous that one of the pillars, the two pillars in the front of the temple, was named after him. Very famous. And of course, the path to salvation came through him and through David, through Obed. It's just a pretty incredible story. It's one of my favorite little books. It's little for one, not very long. It mentions Yahweh quite often. I like that. It shows a woman who is dedicated to her mother-in-law, a woman who works for her, who goes and gleans food so that the woman can live. She's not exactly homeless and not able to feed herself. And ultimately, Naomi becomes the nursemaid to her grandson, who becomes quite famous. That's all I got for this morning. We're just going to call this the Book of Ruth. May Yahweh bless and make America good again.